Imagine this. It's the dead of night. Your home is quiet, your family is asleep, and everything feels normal. Then, without warning, your front door explodes inward. A flashbang grenade detonates in your living room, lighting up the entire house. Armed FBI agents rush in, yelling, pointing rifles, grabbing you, throwing you to the ground, and slapping handcuffs on your wrists so hard they leave marks. Your wife is held at gunpoint. Your child is screaming in terror, and during all of this chaos, confusion, and fear, you think one thing: why is this happening? What did we do? Then reality hits you. They raided the wrong house. This isn't just a rare mistake or some exaggerated story floating on social media. This exact situation is what happened to a real family, the Martin family, and their case has now reached the United States Supreme Court, resulting in a massive 9-0 unanimous ruling that could reshape the way federal agents are held accountable in this country. And yes, this ruling could have major implications for law-abiding gun owners and Second Amendment supporters going forward. In today's video, we're breaking down the full story. What happened during this raid, why the family sued, how the government tried to dodge responsibility, and what the Supreme Court's ruling actually means for you. But before we dig into the details, take a quick second to support the channel by subscribing. It's one of the easiest ways to help this community grow. And as always, make sure you're still subscribed because YouTube loves to quietly unsubscribe people, especially on channels that talk about firearms, the Second Amendment, and government accountability. So double check real quick. Alright, now let's get into the case. The case we're talking about is Martin versus United States, and it began in a suburban area outside Atlanta. Back in 2017, the FBI was preparing for a pre-dawn raid to capture suspected gang members. They had a specific target address. They had intelligence. They had a plan, but the plan fell apart because of one stunning, almost unbelievable mistake. The lead agent responsible for guiding the team, Special Agent Lawrence Guerrera, typed the target address into his personal GPS. Not the official system. Not agency-provided navigation. His own personal device. And instead of routing the team to the correct home, that GPS sent them to a completely different location, the home of Katrina Martin, where she lived with her boyfriend and her 7-year-old son. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, surely the agents double-checked the house number before launching an armed raid, right? Surely someone verified the address visually? Surely there were safety protocols to prevent something like this? You would think so. But no, without any warning, without knocking, without verifying anything, the FBI agents smashed through the wrong front door. They detonated flashbangs. They swarmed the house. They grabbed Katrina's boyfriend, who was hiding in a closet because he thought intruders were breaking in. They ripped Katrina out of bed, half-dressed, handcuffed her, and pointed a gun at her head. They hauled her 7-year-old son out of the home as well. And during all this, not a single agent paused to ask, does this look like the right place? Only after they had dragged the family out, terrified and confused, did one of the agents finally notice something sitting on a coffee table, a stack of mail. Mail that clearly displayed a completely different address than the one they were supposed to be raiding. That was the moment the agents realized they were in the wrong place. If you've ever wondered how catastrophic incompetence can get inside federal agencies, this case is exhibit. After the raid, the Martin family decided to sue the federal government under a law known as the Federal Tort Claims Act, or FTCA. This law gives citizens the right to sue the United States for certain wrongful acts committed by federal employees. It's one of the only pathways ordinary people have to hold the federal government accountable in civil court. But, and this is a big but, the FTCA also includes a huge list of exceptions. Areas where the government has carved out immunity for itself. One of the most important exceptions in this case is called the discretionary function exception. This exception says the government cannot be sued if the mistake happened because an employee made a decision that involved judgment, choice, or policy considerations. So what did the government argue here? They claimed that the agents had discretion to plan the raid however they wanted, including the decision to enter the wrong house. Yes, you heard that correctly. The government argued, seriously, that using the wrong address was part of the agent's discretionary judgment. Therefore, they said the family couldn't sue. The government basically told the Martins, too bad. We messed up, but you can't do anything about it. This argument was so extreme, so absurd, and so broad that if the Supreme Court had agreed with it, federal agents across the country could use it as a shield for almost any mistake. And that's exactly why this case matters for gun owners. The wrong house raids don't just hurt innocent families. They often intersect with self-defense rights. If someone breaks into your home at 4 a.m. armed and yelling, and you reasonably believe you're under attack, a gun owner might defend themselves. Imagine what could happen if the federal government had unlimited immunity any time an agent used his judgment, Even if that judgment led him to invade the wrong home, family pets get killed. Innocent people get shot. Children get traumatized. Homeowners get criminally charged for defending themselves against what looks like a home invasion. And then, under the government's argument, they would have no right to sue afterward. That is why the Supreme Court stepping in mattered so much. When the case reached the United States Supreme Court, something incredibly rare happened. All 9 justices agreed, in a unanimous ruling, the Supreme Court said, "No, the government does not get broad immunity in this case." Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote the opinion. The court said that the law enforcement proviso in the FTCA and the government's attempt to twist its meaning does not override every other part of the FTCA. The government was trying to stretch one narrow provision into a blanket shield from accountability. The Supreme Court rejected that completely. They vacated the ruling from the 11th Circuit and sent the case back down, telling the lower court to re-examine everything under the correct understanding of the law. That's a major win for the Martin family. But it's also a major win for anybody who cares about government overreach, wrongful raids, and the limits of federal power. Here's where things stand. Now, the Supreme Court sent the case back to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. That court has ordered both sides to file new supplemental briefs. These briefs are due November 21st, after the DOJ got an extension by claiming the shutdown disrupted their ability to respond. Recently, an amicus brief, a kind of friend of the court analysis, was filed by Professor Gregory Sisk, a respected expert on the FTCA and a Federalist Society member. His brief basically says, for decades, courts have misread this exception and turned it into immunity far beyond what Congress intended. You now have a rare chance to fix it. He argues that the government should not be able to claim immunity every time they can imagine a hypothetical policy reason for what happened. Under the current misinterpretation, the government only needs to invent a vague policy justification and boom, they're immune. Sisk argues that this approach has completely gutted the original purpose of the FTCA. His brief pushes the 11th Circuit to limit the discretionary function exception to what Congress intended, actual social, economic, or political policy. Not imaginary excuses. If the 11th Circuit agrees, federal agents across the country could face much more accountability when they make severe mistakes. Now let's answer the big question. What does this case mean for gun owners, constitutionalists, and people who simply want the government held accountable? Here's the truth. Wrong house raids often escalate into violent encounters. Innocent people defending their families can become victims of law enforcement errors. If the government had blanket immunity, there would be no recourse. Accountability would disappear. The incentive to be careful would evaporate. The Supreme Court's ruling signals something important. Federal immunity is not limitless. The government cannot hide behind discretion every single time agents cause harm. The FTCA was never supposed to be an escape hatch for federal agencies. And thanks to this ruling, the courts are being forced to reckon with that. If the 11th Circuit rules in the Martin family's favor, and many legal scholars think they will, it will strengthen the ability of ordinary Americans, including gun owners, to hold the federal government accountable when they cross the line. So where does the case stand now? The 11th Circuit will receive supplemental briefs by the end of next week. Then they'll issue a new ruling under the Supreme Court's guidance. The DOJ is going to have a much harder time justifying the agent's actions because the Supreme Court narrowed their arguments dramatically. We'll see whether the 11th Circuit follows that instruction closely or tries to resist it. Either way, this case is far from over, and its implications could shape future fights over federal power, police raids, and citizen rights. As new filings come in, I'll break them down for you right here on the channel. If you found this analysis helpful, please hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. It really helps keep this channel going. And if you want more updates on cases like this, check out one of the videos on the screen right now. YouTube thinks you'll appreciate them. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay informed. And as always, this nation was built by armed scholars, and it will be protected by armed scholars.